Welcome students to the update right here on the HYFNtv Network. It's our mission to bring unfiltered, unbiased information to our viewers. Here on the update, we're interviewing Governor, Secretary of State, and Attorney General candidates from each party. These folks are asking for you to vote for them to lead our great state. In this primary candidate interview series, all candidates have been asked the same questions, and all candidates have been invited to speak as well. So sit back, relax, and let's hear from them directly. And then you decide on who you like to choose to vote for on August 2nd. Welcome HYFNT viewers and the update viewers to our series on 2022 election candidates in the primary. We have Mark Finchem, a current representative, who's running for the Secretary of State. Now, we've talked about how all of the government is getting a nice turnover, as most everyone's termed out. And so right now we have Mark Finchem. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
A lot of our viewers are first-time voters, and we have a lot of parents who are looking for our network to give some really unbiased information. Just the facts, please, as Joe Friday used to say. We just want to know who you are, what you're about. We understand the Secretary of State office is a very important office. So we have a two-part question starting out, okay?
All right.
The first part, number one, tell me about your first time voting, because a lot of these folks, this is their first time voting, and it's a whole new experience. The second part of this question is, when voting, a lot of folks in our audience, we even polled them, 22% said they don't vote in the primary. They vote in the general only because they don't really want to go through all the fighting and figure out who's who. So, tell the first time voters why it's important to get out August 2nd and not go out and wait until, or hold out until the general. Tell them why it's important for them to get out and make their voice heard right now, August 2nd.
I think that's a great question. Now, for the first part of the question, I can't remember back that far. I remember the experience. That was a time when we had mechanical voting machines. You might remember the hanging Chad thing. So you went into a voting booth and you pulled the screen behind you and you pushed down on the various levers of the people you wanted, and then you took a handle and went like this, and it made a punch card. And the punch card dropped into the machine, and the curtain came back. Who was on the ballot? I just don't remember. It would have been 1976, whoever that is, would have been the first election that I would have voted in.
1976.
1976.
Now you participate in the general and primary for the most part, most of your life?
Absolutely. And here's the important thing for your viewers to know. When you participate in the primary, you have the opportunity, in fact, even greater opportunity within the sphere of your beliefs. So, for example, in the primary we have right now, we have 4 individuals who are running for Arizona Secretary of State. We're not all the same. Depending upon who you vote for in the primary, you will have far more influence on public policy, on the policy execution of the individuals who are running in the primary. Now, I'm a Donald Trump endorsed candidate. General Flynn has endorsed me, Mike Lindell. They endorsed me because I stood up when other people didn't and asked a lot of questions. So I would advocate that perhaps one of the more important elections that you engage in is the primary, because you're the one determining, you the voter, are determining who's actually going to be on the ballot. And because we have closed primaries here in Arizona, it's the Republican registered voter and the independent who requests a Republican ballot that are the ones that are determining who is going to be on the ballot. Now, when you get to the general, that's already baked.
You just got your options.
Your options are limited then.
Right.
Because it's the Republican candidate, the Democrat candidate, and then, of course, the lesser parties. So if you really want to have impact on who is going to be on the ballot and who is ultimately going to be a part of the administration that you put up, that you elect, participation in the primary is critical.
So to give some summation to that answer, is you're saying the primary is actually more important than the general to some degree, because you're getting to pick your purest form of your type of Republican?
In a different way,
okay.
That's a great way to say it.
Okay.
It's not more important. It's just as
Equally
important.
as important. Okay.
So don't discount your vote,
Sure.
I guess is what I'm saying, because then you're allowing somebody else to decide who you're going to vote for
Sure.
in the general.
So the 22%, and I didn't dig into the polls too deep on the why. I just know that 22% chose. I was a bit presumptive when I said probably because they didn't want to get into the back and forth. But the 22% that
Right.
are kind of sitting out till the general, your point to them is get out and vote. It's just as
Yeah.
important.
Well, and you've got the opportunity to evaluate people on their merits. So and I've done this all my life, the first one that starts throwing mud and goes negative is the first one in my mind that loses. I won't vote for people that go negative, because what they're doing is they're shifting attention away from their stand on things and trying to vilify the other person. I don't care about what your thoughts are about the other person as a voter.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, what are you offering me?
Mm-hmm.
So when people go negative, that's an immediate turnoff for me.
Okay. So let's jump into learning more about Mark.
Sure.
Okay. So every candidate has a slogan on their website. We get it. It's your flag. You explain who we are. I'm Mark Finchem, and you're telling everyone what it's about. So dive into your slogan, what it means to you, how you came up with it, and tell me about your mission. Tell me about, what your mission is when you say, this is who I am and this separates me from everyone else. Tell me your mission statement.
Well, I'm an America First candidate. Elections belong to the people, not to the government. And elections are a process that is dependent upon people engaged in the process. Now, over the last several decades, we've gone from hand counting of paper ballots to machine counting to now we use optical scanners for counting. And in the process, the people have been pushed out of their elections because we've relied more and more on technology and less on people.
So optical scanners are artificial intelligence?
Some would say they are. They're supposed to capture the ballot as it's been marked, but in the 2020 election, that's not quite what happened. We had Sharpiegate and we had a number of other things that happened. That's one of the reasons that Carrie Lake and I have filed suit in U.S. District Court. It's a civil rights suit to essentially ask for a preliminary injunction against the use of black box ballot tabulation equipment. Now, black box is a term of art in the legal world. It means it's something that you can't see into. So what we have now is a situation, and this played itself out in 2020. We have equipment, particularly in Maricopa County specifically, but also down in Pima County. Maricopa County used Dominion. Pima County used ES&S. They're two different brands of ballot tabulation equipment. They refused to allow inspection of the source code that drives the equipment.
So
so
that's before.
Means.
So before we get on, because I want to dive into that on election integrity.
Okay.
So I just want to pull you back. So
okay.
Finish your thought on that.
So,
but I want to talk about your mission because I want to. Sounds like integrity of the elections is really a crux of your mission.
That is the mission, and what I'm trying to lay out for you is I'm already doing those things that a Secretary of State should be doing, looking out for the integrity of the election. My history, my work history is 21 years DPS officer in West Michigan, law enforcement officer, fraud investigator. Worked for Intuit for a period of time, built their customer-facing fraud countermeasures program for QuickBooks. I've been in office here in the Arizona House of Representatives now for 8 years. I'm term limited out. I'm ready to leave. In fact, I'm basically done, unless, of course, we have a special session for an emergency. Education-wise, I have a bachelor's degree from Grand Canyon University in state and local public policy, graduated summa cum laude. I have a master's degree in law and economics from University of Arizona Rogers Law School, and I'm a Six Sigma certified process engineer. Now, what that means is
all that background,
all of that together,
tells you why your mission points you in the direction of election integrity.
Exactly.
So look right at our camera and tell them, with Mark Finchem, what your mission is in regards to election integrity. Just give us that one tagline, that punchline, one tagline that we can tag to you.
My job as your Secretary of State is to hold people accountable to follow the laws that are already on the books. The issue we have today is that we have a Secretary of State and we have judges who do not observe the law as it's been written. They always try and skirt around it. And when I say always, I do mean always. One of the reasons that the Maricopa County election in 2020 was so flawed is because people didn't follow the law. That's my job.
All right. So let's jump into our next category.
Okay.
So Arizona is a unique state. We don't have a lieutenant governor.
That's correct.
So since we don't have a lieutenant governor, the Secretary of State stands in line of succession for the governorship. The Secretary of State also serves as acting governor whenever the governor is anticipated to be gone out of state or is maybe on a knife, maybe sick or ill and can't do his job. The Secretary is the keeper of the seal of Arizona and administrator of the oath of office. So keeper of the seal means anything that gets that stamp from the state of Arizona has passed through the Secretary's office. And administrator of oath of office is making sure those who get elected go through the proper channels and swear their oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and Arizona. So what executive leadership, now I know we just went kind of through your background, but tell me about what executive leadership in the way of if you had to step in to be the governor, that's a big job.
Yep.
What leadership do you bring to the table and all that history we just went through, which is pretty amazing. Tell our viewers and tell me why that has prepared you and how it's prepared you to be in a position of, God forbid, we had a situation where you had to step in and be governor.
So perhaps the most important role in my very eclectic work experience, God's blessed me richly with many opportunities, was as a senior manager at Intuit. I had to build from scratch, basically, a fraud countermeasures program that ultimately had 125 people in India, Chennai, India, 50 people in Sault Ste. Marie, and 50 people here in Tucson, Arizona. It's an executive level opportunity, developmental opportunity, and I think that it gave me the opportunity to lead a multinational effort to protect and to serve 1.2 million customers. It was me. Of course, I was responsible to those up the line, but it goes to the ability to build high-performing teams
In the lead.
and ultimately lead those teams for a successful outcome, not for yourself. This has never been about me. This has been about the people that I serve.
Right.
God built me with a heart for service, and I'm miserable when I don't have the opportunity to help people. That's why when I first came up with the idea at Intuit, we recognized, as I was just somebody answering phone calls, we had people that were hurting. We had people that had their information corrupted, and somebody had to step forward and tell management, you got a really big problem here. And it's about the time that Sarbanes-Oxley came along, and of course they really didn't want to hear what Mark had found in the computer system, but they said, okay, tell you what, we're going to fund you to build that business unit. And it was a very successful build out. Got us to the point where they moved from CDs to software as a service. But my job was basically to work myself out of a job. Okay, so that gives you that executive experience to make a call about the company you serve, the people you serve, the much bigger picture. And I think that's the measure of leadership.
Okay, that's a great answer. I haven't had it answered that way, so that's a great way to hear it, because I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of servant leadership, and that's what that sounds like to me. So let's jump into the next part of that, because as keeper of the seal of Arizona, is there a circumstance where you would refuse to certify government documents?
Well, if they're fraudulent. So there's a bit of a juxtaposition here. One, if refusal to sign certain documents is a Class 6 felony. Okay? Signing a fraudulent document is a Class 5 felony. So if you have reason to believe, if you knew or should have known that a document that you're signing is fraudulent or is based in fraud, is fictitious, as they say, it's a crime to sign it.
See, the reason we've asked this question, and a lot of these questions came directly from our viewers that submitted them to us. We have a system where the second in command could be the opposite party of the first in command. We currently have that now.
Right.
We've had people, actually I believe almost all of the current Republican governors, candidates, are saying that they 100% oppose what our current Republican governor has done, as in the sense of certifying the election from 2020. Now, a lot of our viewership also said they're happy to move on from 2020, as well as, I think beating that horse to some degree does get tiresome. But we have a party right now that the Republican Party is taking a position by watching them and interviewing them and asking these same questions. We're being told that, certification should not have been done, and as keeper of the seal, that's your job, right?
Exactly.
So, you definitely put a very big conundrum there where you either take the felony 5 or take the felony 6. It depends on how it's shaken out.
Well,
if you truly believe.
But there is a solution.
What's the solution? Let's hear it.
Do your job up front.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that I bring to the table is a process orientation, okay? That is, to start with, you do a simple audit up front. If you're using electronic equipment, do you have individual usernames and passwords? Has the equipment been certified by the elections?
Let's say these have all been.
Let's say all of these have
all
been
these things
done.
have checked down. I mean,
The likelihood that you will have a fraudulent result at the end is minimized. But if you don't do those things up front, if you're not following the law in the process, the likelihood that the election will be irredeemably compromised, like the 2020 election, goes up.
So, and I don't want to put an opinion out to agree or disagree with your premise on whether the compromises happened or not happened. And I frankly want to do that just let the viewers do their own viewing and decide. But the question is, because of the fact that there's one side of the fence that's saying they would not have certified, and you're the keeper of the seal, should you get this job. Katie Hobbs currently certified. She's running for governor. I'm pretty confident had she been governor, she would have certified that as well.
Probably.
In hindsight, looking at the situation, is your solution was fixing it beforehand. Well, we just saw a situation where there was no fixing of things beforehand if the premises were going to stay in that premise, right? So the question is, and is that a point as a election where you feel that there's no integrity there? Is that a point where you would say I can't certify this?
Well, I think the ultimate test was the law followed? Because if the law wasn't followed, you by definition have an illegal election. I mean, the whole point of having laws, the whole point of having an election procedures manual that is essentially a recipe book on how to handle an election, if you don't follow those things, you have an illegal election.
So the answer is yes, there are.
With all things being
there's
equal,
a time that you would say I'm not signing this.
if
the
the election was held according to the law, where everything was observed, meaning you did the things that are required of you in the elections procedure manual. We have visibility into the equipment so that, because that's one of the problems we've got right now. You have election equipment vendors who actually have a higher level of authority in the election than the elected officials who are supposed to manage the election. We can't stand for that.
Well, let's get into our next question then, because our next question is about voter integrity.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, I'll just put it to you this way. I know we could probably spend 5 hours on it. There's movies out there, the 2000 Mules.
Kill Chain.
We have folks who I read an article today when it referred to the 2000 Mules, the widely debunked video of 2000 Mules.
That sounds like a leftist talking point.
I glanced up to see who's writing it, and my point is that's the narrative out there.
It's one narrative.
That's a narrative out there. As a nonpartisan viewer, a lot of our viewership comes from just getting into politics, just dabbling, just trying to figure out who's who, what's what, and they're hearing these conflicting narratives, and that's why I asked the first question, right? About what do we do? Do we got to worry about Mark saying, "I'm not signing this election"? I wanted to hear your perspective, so I appreciate that. But to jump into election integrity, currently in the office, their job is to try to grow the election rolls and get more involvement and more activity in participation. So another two-parter: A, what do you think they're doing good, and would you continue? And B, what would you do differently to get more voter participation? And then we're going to jump into some election integrity stuff.
Okay. Well, there are two phrases to watch out for. One is baseless claims, and the other is debunked. Those are propaganda terms. So let's be really clear about this.
Okay.
Fact is fact. There are news organizations that would love to have you believe that their narrative is the only narrative. The problem is this is coming from the same people who put up the 1619 Project as fact. They've already admitted that it's not. So when it comes to, you're going to have to repeat the question again.
So that's okay. So when it comes to
the first part,
voter engagement,
which
is getting more voters out, right?
Yeah.
So what are they doing right? Because if you look at the website right now, it says that their job and their mission is voter engagement and to turn out more voters and really get them involved. So what are they doing right, and what could they be doing differently?
Well, we've got a couple of problems with the system.
Okay.
And maybe it's doing something right is perhaps harder to explain than doing the things that are wrong. Motor, for example, motor voter, where every time somebody gets a driver's license, they're automatically registered to vote. Well, here's the problem with that. You have people from multiple states that when they come into a new state, they get a voter registration and a driver's license. They still have their driver's license and voter registration in another state. So that's a problem.
So they're saying there's no screening on...
There is. So ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center, was originally set up to try and prevent that, only to find out that that's George Soros money, and both the Republicans and the Democrats have been able to dip in there and maneuver electronically voters. Okay, we know for a fact that the voter rolls are filled with fictitious voters. So one of the things that we need to do, one of the big things we need to do, is cleanse the voter rolls of the people who, A, are inactive, have been inactive for the last 4 elections. In fact, we've done that in Arizona law. But we also have to make sure that the people who want to vote can vote. We've got a situation right now where a number of people have reported that when the new voter registration cards came out, that they mysteriously were moved from the Republican Party to the Democrat Party. Because with redistricting, you've changed your congressional district, you've changed your school board lines, all of those things, legislative
lines, yeah.
I mean, it's a hot mess. But at the same time, why were their party affiliations changed? Now that's an internal problem, and
so
that does not instill confidence.
So what you're saying is that is the job of the Secretary of State when that every 10 years when they do redrawing of the lines, and so I knew 2020 they just redid the lines again.
Yep.
So when they did that, at that point,
there are some things that happened within the system,
and the system in the Secretary of State's office.
Well, no. So the Secretary of State is more of an oversight role,
okay,
a leadership role, if you will. In Arizona, we don't have a state election. We have 15 county elections. The elections are run by the counties.
Right.
And each county is slightly different. I mean, you wouldn't expect that Apache County, with a minuscule population, would be run the same way as Maricopa County, which is 63% of the vote in the state. The whole point is you want to make sure that the people who want to vote it's easy for them to vote. It's easy for them to register to vote. But we also have a cutoff. 30 days before the election, that's the end of voter registration.
So let me ask you to kind of get back to my question about engagement. What would we do differently in a Mark Finchem Secretary of State office for more voter engagement?
I would like to see us spend a little more time with seniors in high school, because they are the next wave of voters that are coming out.
Right.
Okay. so that they understand, one, our form of government. We're not a democracy, as much as the schools have taught that. We're a republic, democratically elected. I'd like people to understand the importance of the primary. Why do we have a primary? Okay, it saddens me to hear that 22% of potential voters don't see any purpose in it. Well, I think the reason they don't see any purpose in it is they haven't had that purpose explained. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. But I think that's one of the things that we need to make sure that in the schools, both private and public, that seniors are exposed to. This is the mechanics of voting, not political stuff. Mm-hmm. This is the mechanics of voting. This is why it's important to you. And that can be done in a single day. I think also that I have a problem with voter registration at the schools because you've always got an adult in a senior position, a position of authority over the kids. But I do believe that it would be a great idea for us to hand out voter registration forms for them to take home and have a conversation with their family about that, with their parents about that, because ultimately they're the influencers that know their kids the best and will help them make some choices. Okay. So I think that's one of the big things we can do. But moreover, what concerns me is the voter rolls that have fictitious voters in there. If those individuals are somehow used to vote, they actually nullify legitimate votes. So you have to be very cautious with the whole engagement thing. Let's make sure that we're registering real people
appropriately. Yeah.
Appropriately.
Gotcha.
And by the way,
all right,
you do that by following the law.
Okay, gotcha. So that's Mark Finchem.
There's a theme going on here,
right? So all right, let's jump into election integrity. Secretary of State serves as chief election officer for the state. One of the current goals we talked about was registering and getting engagement. We've talked about that. I love the fact that you want to talk to our seniors, and that's who you're talking to. So you've already started on the right track. But what I want to talk about, which is a little bit more important, in my opinion, because we've really hit this the whole time, is we've talked about, we've heard this election integrity and trusting our elections. This controversy over the 2020 elections has been a big deal. Really, for those who are hearing just a lot of information that's coming from either side, is confusing. To the novice viewers, like a lot of our first-time viewers, they're still learning what the Secretary of State office is all about. We're learning that you're really into the election, and that's really your job. But when it comes to election integrity, explain why the Secretary of State's office should be running point on this, what you'd be doing, how you'd be doing it, and what you'd be doing differently. Because I will tell you this, never in my lifetime did I ever think in America that we'd worry about the integrity of our elections. I grew up, and I think most folks grew up just thinking this is America. We don't have to worry about that. We have safety things in place to make sure that everyone's transparent and honest. Every candidate on the Republican side so far has been talking about election integrity. I want to just give you the floor. Just tell us about why you run point on it as Secretary of State and what you do and why this is so important.
Well, for starters, the Secretary of State is the elected official who is most responsible for the patency of an election, for the integrity of the election, for the security of the election. They are the most senior election official in the state. Now, knowing that, and knowing that we have 15 counties within the state, each one of those counties has an election director that basically is responsible to the county supervisors. So there's some checks and balances here. Mm-hmm. Secretary of State is responsible for making sure that each one of those counties abides by the election procedures manual, has certified equipment, fulfills all the obligations under state statutes that concern election integrity and election security. Now, as you probably know, I'm the guy who called out the problems after constituents came to me and said, we've got a problem in some of these elections. So on November 30th, I held a public hearing, ad hoc public hearing on election integrity at the Hyatt Regency downtown. And we took 10.5 hours of testimony and evidence from citizens, from President Trump's team that said, hey, we've got something to tell you about that we can't get into the courts. Now, there's a reason for that. the courts said that this is a political matter. Political matters don't belong in the courts, they belong in the legislature. Well, it was a legislative ad hoc hearing on election integrity. Perfect place for it. Now, in the role of Secretary of State, it'll be much different. One of the things that I propose, and I know that there are a couple of candidates that support me in this, I think that we need to have an audit team for each county. I would have a certified auditor along with a representative from the Attorney General's office and a scribe. That 3-person team times 15 counties is there to observe everything that goes on during the election.
They'd report to...
Now, they would report to the Secretary of State, since that person, hopefully me, is most responsible for the election. But that report also needs to go to the legislature. It needs to go to the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. Because they ultimately, under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, it is the legislature that chooses the time, place, and manner for an election. That's not an executive branch responsibility. But once that election is done, and once the county says we're ready to certify the election, we need to make sure that they have gone through the entire checklist of the Election Procedures Manual. They've followed all of the state statutes, so that nobody can claim that there was a thumb held on the scale of election justice. That's the role of the Secretary of State. Short and sweet.
You would just follow that to the T.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, another role about Secretary of State, and we got through that pretty easy. That was...
Oh, I could do the deep dive on that.
But we got through that pretty
easy.
I
will add that with that November 30th, 2020 hearing, we now have over 28 states that have engaged in similar hearings. And you look at, for example, Loudoun County, Virginia. You look at Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Fulton County, Georgia. We are seeing problems in virtually every state with people who want to protect the status quo, and they're both Republicans and Democrats.
Versus those who are wanting to upend the system and do an audit? Is that what you're...
I wouldn't say it upending.
Audit, but I'm saying...
I would say that there's a reason...
Put more eyeballs on the system.
There's a reason we do audits. We do, and you know, the left doesn't like audit because you're going to find out something. Well, the whole purpose of doing an audit is to identify one of two possibilities. Either nothing happened and you're reassured that nothing happened, or that something happened, you know what happened, and you know what to fix. That's the purpose of an audit.
Right.
So for people to say, well, you know, audits undermine our confidence in government, quite the opposite. What undermines our confidence in government is something like what happened in Pinal County last week. They forgot to put on all the municipal offices on the ballot. And the Secretary of State signed off on it. That's a huge miss. And that tells me that one of the things that needs to come into that office is attention to detail. That's what a Six Sigma guy does. You map out the process and you follow the process until you see a defect. When there's a defect, you pull it out, examine what caused that defect, design a response to it, and put it back into the system.
So let's talk about some more boring stuff that the Secretary of State does. Secretary of State is over making sure that companies and getting the registration, organizations, charities are filling out their reports, lobbyists. So for those who don't know, because it's kind of more vanilla, boring part of the job. I mean, it's not nearly as exciting as election integrity, especially what we've went through.
By the way, election integrity used to be boring. Now, all of a sudden, it's not. But I get your question.
Fair point. So,
what are the things that we do?
So, because a lot of folks confuse the Corporation Commission's job with what the Secretary of State job is when it comes to business.
Yeah.
And I do know this as my nephew, who has multiple scholarships to play football, is choosing to not play football because he wants to run a business. So he's decided to start college this year so he can run a business, and he's getting a business degree. It's just his goals. So there are a lot of folks that are young entrepreneurs. They need to understand how to navigate the system. Again, the difference between the Corporation Commission and the Secretary of State can be confusing when it comes to the role of business. So explain to our viewers what that role is.
Well, you have business registration. with the Secretary of State. Now, the Corporation Commission, it almost looks like it's a duplication of service. And frankly, I would probably advocate to the legislature, can we put that in one place and clear the confusion? Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of that can be done with an automated process. You want to start a business? Great. Here's your business start page. And I mean, it's a graphic user interface. You just follow the steps to go through it. We don't have that right now. The other thing we don't have, which doesn't make a lick of sense to me, a lobbyist has to register with the Secretary of State and tell the people who they're representing. That can take 3 weeks. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, you should know the instant that a lobbyist is now working for ABC company. Well, that goes to the manual nature of the process right now. Now, I've spoken with a lot of lobbyists because I've been in the legislature for quite some time, and they're appalled to know that it takes 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks in order for their representation to appear to the public. Most of the good lobbyists want to know they want the public to know right away. So automation of that process is a high priority for me. That should be as simple as the lobbyist going online, putting in their identifier, putting in the identification of the company that they're going to represent, push submit, and it is published to the world.
And you're saying with businesses going the process of getting certified through the state with the business, it should be automated as well.
Exactly. This is all simple stuff that can be taken care of with software upgrade, and it's not expensive.
Now, is this something that you, as a Secretary of State, would have to send some folks from your office to the legislature to get some rules changed to make these things happen?
Some of it is already covered under rulemaking authority.
Okay.
A lot of it has to do with technological upgrades. I mean, we've already got the money to do it. We just don't have the right people in. And that's one of the things that the Secretary of State is going to have to do, is change the culture of the office as it is right now. Things are not getting done. Things to serve the people are not getting done. In fact, the current Secretary of State seems to serve party more than people.
Well, that's a great way to get into my last question.
I'm glad I set you up.
Oh, man, I like I told you. So here's the thing. We want to go through your qualifications. But the real question that I think is a great way to end it is it a political office or not? I mean, we have 2 parties running for it that are saying that they're the chief officer of elections.
Right.
But it's not. Some folks say it's not supposed to be a partisan office.
Right.
You know, because it's more of a processing office. So we've already hit your personal qualifications, but you can hit those again if you like.
Okay.
But tell me about your feelings, your beliefs on how partisan of an office this should be.
So it's an interesting problem. During the election, it's partisan because you have different views on how things should be done. The moment that decision, that contest is decided, you have to take off your political hat. Now, the current Secretary of State kind of demonstrates that point. She has said publicly that she believes that her role is to see to it that as many Democrats are elected as possible. Quote, no, madam. My objective is to see to it that every individual engaged in the electoral process is following the law. That by definition means that you're lifting the thumb off of the scale of election justice, and you're permitting the free flow of information between the people and the elections officials to see to it that their will is truly represented. It disturbs me to no end that there are folks out there who would say, well, you know, the Finchem guy, he could change the elections. Well, in fact, I had an interview with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation a couple of days ago, and they said, you know, there are people that are running against you that are terrified that you would change elections. Are they afraid of the fact that I would enforce the law? I mean, when you have complaints, Secretary of State might investigate that complaint, but with whatever they find, they turn that over to the Attorney General. Well, what's the basis of the complaint? A violation of law. The Secretary of State is not a public policy office. That's the legislature. Secretary of State is in the executive branch and is expected to execute on the laws that are on the books, the regulations that have already been passed by the legislature, faithfully and with fidelity. That's the role of the Secretary of State. So I would challenge those folks who are fearful of me being in that role. What, you're afraid of somebody enforcing the law? Perhaps you should just follow the law. It would be a whole lot easier, right?
Sure.
So, but my commitment to law enforcement, to investigations, I mean, I've lived a good portion of my life seeing to it that people were treated fairly.
Right.
So to your question, is it a political office? It's political up to the moment that you're elected. And then you have to take off your partisan hat and see to it that everyone is treated fairly, no matter what party, no matter what affiliation.
So, Mark, I'll tell you, I had a great discussion with you today. I appreciate the long-form interviews that we can have with our viewers. Get to know you, get to know about you. If you can look right over my shoulder to this camera and just tell them why it is so important that if they've already got their ballot in the mail and they're looking at it when this airs, or if they plan on showing up on August 2nd, why they should plan on showing up and why you are the guy.
All right. My name is Mark Finchem. I'm dedicated to election integrity, election security. There's a reason that Donald Trump, General Mike Flynn, Mike Lindell, so many others, Congressman Paul Gosar, have endorsed me because I had the courage to stand up and ask questions. I had the courage to challenge the status quo because there were things that were so irregular they could not be explained. That's the kind of representation you are going to want in the Secretary of State's office, not somebody who's willing to just let things go by. That's how we got where we're at today. I don't have a problem with challenging establishment folks who want to just move on. The problem is, until the election issues are resolved, we're going to expect the same kind of outcome. Now, fortunately, we have taken some steps, a number of steps in the legislature, which I, as the Secretary of State, will have to enforce in the coming years. If you want to know more about me, you can go to votefinchem.com. That's VOTE, F like Frank, INCHEM.com. Click on the news tab, and you may even see this video.
Awesome, Mark. Well, listen, before we let you go, is there anything I'm missing? Any signatures that folks need to know you by? I saw you walking into the studio with the hat. Just tell me, what kind of viewers know you by when they see you?
I am told that this has become somewhat iconic.
Okay, so that is your signature look.
That's the signature look.
All right, guys. Well, listen up. You'll hear this air along with the Democrats and Republicans of each party in a long-form interview, so you can hear from their mouth what their views are, and you can decide. Make sure on August 2nd, you go vote. We'll see you next time.